Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the first generation Intel iMac, and I have a beautiful 20-inch example to show you. This is one that I cherry-picked, if you will, from the pile of machines I was getting rid of this year, and well, from my day job. And this machine, you know, it's cool in its own right, you know, but as the internet progresses into the shithole that it's turning into, machines like this one are becoming less and less usable on the World Wide Web. You know, it's just getting harder and harder to find browsers that will run on these machines. This one will support up to 10.7.5. In fact, that's what it was running when I picked it up. But it's now running 10.6.8 because I wanted Rosetta support. But again, as the world moves forward, it becomes harder and harder. And I cite the following example. Right here we have a Windows 98 machine that is practically unusable on the internet. I mean, you can do Google searches, you might even be able to do Wikipedia, but beyond that, without finding some super hacky custom browser, you know, it's just become almost unusable on the modern internet. And that's where these machines will become, which is why unfortunately, they had to be retired this year, because it was becoming harder and harder to support them, you know, as Web 2.0 content progresses and browsers start dropping off the face of the planet that will still support, you know, in a meaningful way, these older operating systems. So a bit about myself. I started working in the IT field professionally in the summer of 2006. Now that was 10 years ago this month. And a lot has changed since then. When I took my job, Apple was still selling machines with PowerPC processors. It seems like it was yesterday that they stopped making PowerPC systems, but it was 10 years ago. I'm fudging the numbers a little bit. I'm not going to narrow it down to a specific date because I don't give a shit. But one of the last PowerPC systems Apple ever sold was the iMac, and this one right here is one of those machines. This is one of the parts of it were from the last shipment of iMacs that my organization received. I work for a public school district, I'll just say that much. A lot of people have asked, what do you do for work, where do you work? How much do you make? Well, I'm not going to tell you how much I make, but I do work for a public school district. I won't say where, and I'd prefer if we keep that private for obvious reasons. But this iMac right here was one of the last ever produced, and therefore one of the last PowerPCs produced. Apple still sold the iMac to public school districts to clean out whatever supply they had. I think as late as early summer 2006. I think that's when they finally stopped shipping them, because I know that we bought as many as we possibly could. So once those were discontinued, we needed a machine to replace them. And Apple decided that they would set aside one particular version of the first generation Intel iMac as an educational model. And if I'm recalling this all from memory, I could quickly go over to lowendmac.com and look up what the actual specs were. But the very first batch of educational Intel 17-inch iMacs that we received would have been in the summer of 2007. That's when we started purchasing them in quantity to outfit a building that we were in the middle of constructing. And by the summer of 2007, it was ready to be opened. And the first batch of machines were, in fact, the iMac 5,2s. And the 5,2s were the educational version of the iMac. It had a combo drive, no super drive, so it could read and write CDs, but not DVDs. It would only read them. It had a 120 gig Hitachi hard drive. It had a Bluetooth delete option. Basically, there was no possibility of adding Bluetooth internally. The header is actually missing from the logic board. They actually went that far into it. They're like, no Bluetooth for you, under no circumstances, unless you had an external device. They featured I believe it was the Intel Core 2 Duo. We had some Core Duo, the earlier ones. We had a couple of Core Duos as sample machines. We only bought a handful of them, but we didn't actually have very many of those. But the Core 2 Duos, they were the 1.83 gigahertz Core 2 Duo processors. And they had a low-end graphics chip. The educational model it had, what made it different. Number one, it shipped without an Apple remote, so that was not there in the box. It shipped without Bluetooth, and it could not be added. It shipped with the low-end ATI graphics chipset that they had at the time, and escapes my memory as to which one it was, but I'm not going to bother looking it up. If you want to know, you can look it up yourself. The iMac 5,2. The iMac 5,1 was the 20-inch model, and I have one right there. So the 4,2, I think, was the earliest Intel version. It was the Core Duo, and I'm just, again, recalling from memory, and I got a lot in there, so I could be wrong. It had also shipped, the first machines also shipped with this keyboard. This is actually the keyboard that I rebuilt in my last video. And it's working flawlessly. And you received this mouse here. We'll go over these in a little bit. So, the real purpose of this video is to really discuss the future collectability of the 5,2s, or basically any early Intel iMac. From this point on, we're going to call them the acrylic iMacs. They're made of a white acrylic translucent plastic that's painted from the inside. So one of the now I've been doing computer work. I've actually officially been collecting computers on and off really, since the late 90s, when I was actually gathering up 1980s machines, until my parents finally said, listen, get rid of them. I'm like, alright, fine, I'll get rid of them. That's kind of the bane of every kid's existence. You know, your parents can tell you what to do. They can tell you how much of any one particular thing you can have. A lot of my viewers have mentioned casually in conversation that their parents made them get rid of their fan collection or their computer collection. My parents weren't that bad, and I wasn't that much of a hoarder. I only kept machines that I knew would be worth something someday, and turns out I was right. I was dead on. If I only knew back then how right I was, I wouldn't have been throwing so much money away. I had more Apple IIs than you could shake a stick at. At one point in time, I had the opportunity to take an entire truckload of the damn things for free, but I didn't. Oh man. Anyway, the things we knew, if we knew then what we know now, you know. So my parents would only let me keep a couple of machines at one time, and I was okay with it. We lived in a very small home. It wasn't a big deal. I had a life. Honestly, I had friends. I had a bicycle. I worked on cars and lawnmowers, and I had a life. So I didn't care about all that shit. I kept what I could and got rid of what I couldn't. So far, the only machine I kept, by the way, was my Tandy 1000. I still have that. So, we're really derailing. This is going to be a long video, so just deal with it. All right, so where the hell was I? So early on, the Intel iMacs, when they were released, they were state of the art. I mean, they were never really state of the art. They were basically a package deal. You know, when you buy a Mac, you know. Well, those of you who do know that you're not buying the latest and greatest. You're really not. Apple doesn't sell the latest and greatest. They actually sell stuff that's been perfected, stuff that's been out, it's been tested in the market, and when it succeeds, Apple says, okay, We're going to polish it. We're gonna market it. We're gonna price it as high as we can. And if it sells, we'll keep selling them. And when consumers and businesses get dependent on them, we will suddenly discontinue them. That's because we're Apple. That's what we do. So anyway, biases aside, collectability of the first generation Intel iMac is largely hampered by the limited lifespan of the hardware itself. So, as I mentioned, I've been supporting these machines since they were released. We never had any G5 flat panels. We didn't really get into the Mac thing until the Intels came out. We had a few eMacs, as I mentioned earlier, and we had some older G3 iMacs. But when we started really pushing in the Mac direction, that was when the Intel iMacs were released, and when they were new, they were great. I mean, we really didn't have any dead-on-arrival machines. I recall only one or two, maybe, out of like 600, which is not bad. That's pretty damn good, in fact. So I have nothing bad to say about the machines when they were new. It's really when they started getting older. Now, my job as the sole technician of the entire organization, I was in charge of roughly, at the time, about 2,000 to 3,000 connected devices. We're talking laptops, desktops, peripherals, printers, you name it, projectors, anything that turned on with a switch and plugged into plugged into a wall outlet was my domain if there was a problem with it. So I was never bored. Still, and to this day, I am never bored. And the only reason I've kept the job is because it's still interesting to me. It's still very interesting, and I'm never bored. And it pays well enough. I can live comfortably. So that's why I still do it, and I love it. So as the iMacs started aging, I started noticing trends. And this is what's really going to hurt the machines as they start to age beyond 10 years. As of right now, the oldest one is about 9 years old, a little over 9, or 10 years old for the 4,2s. And as they start to age into the 15-year and the 20-year mark, when the collectability really starts to hit, you're going to find very few working examples, or a very small percentage of working examples. Kind of like the G3 iMacs, the only ones that really seemed to survive were the ones that were bought out by consumers. The ones that were used in school districts, colleges, and other large deployments where they were used heavily. You're going to find a lot of CRT problems. You're going to find a lot of analog board issues. Hard drives, that's pretty much a given. They're going to be dead, if not on their way out. But here's what you're going to be looking at with the Intel iMacs. So, one of the biggest problems that I have with these machines, and this, by the way, is only limited to the 17-inch model. The 20-inch model doesn't have this problem in my experience. Now, yours may differ. So if you're in the same business as I am, you might have a different experience. But I can only speak from my own experience. My deployment consisted of about 600 17-inch models and about 45 or so 20-inch models. No, a little more, probably about 50 20-inch units. And what I found is that the 17-inch, even though they're used about the same amount, they're powered on for the same amount of time each day, they're used in similar environments. The 20-inch models were used in a more graphic-intense environment, in a lab setting. The 17-inch models were used in classrooms, they were used in labs, they were used basically everywhere. The 17-inch models have a guaranteed to fail, almost guaranteed to fail, LCD display. And what you're going to find is on the 17-inch models, you're going to see one or two vertical streaks. And you're going to think, well, it's only one streak, it'll be fine, or one thin band or something. I can live with that. The problem is that always progresses. It gets worse. eventually you're going to lose half the display. That's just the way it works. That's just how it goes. And they all have this problem. About 25% of my 600 machines have had this problem, and it's still happening. You know, just this summer, as we're getting them out of service, we're powering them up for just to verify, you know, their status and see if they even run. And I'm finding that some of them are still having this problem. The solution is a complete replacement of the LCD display. Unless you are well-versed or capable or know somebody who can repair LCD panels, because I believe the problem is one of two things. It's either a bonding issue between the flex cable that goes to the LCD panel itself and connects it to the input board. I don't know what the proper name is, fill in the blank. It's either that cable debonding from the glass, or it's a chip on that interface board. So either way, I don't have the tools or the knowledge to repair them. I've heard of people using soldering bars, which are used in the manufacturing process to repair, if it is in fact the flex circuit debonding. I don't have one of those, and I'm not willing to pay for one. So my solution has been to replace the displays. Now the problem with this is that when you buy a used display off eBay, the problem is guaranteed to happen, and as a matter of fact, it has. Early on in the game, I was doing them under warranty because I'm certified by Apple. I am actually qualified to repair this machine in Apple's size, and I did just that. I did many warranty repairs. I think the warranty issues started to really hit after about the second year of operation. That's when hard drives, LCDs, and optical drives are starting to pop by the million. So, in each warranty repair, we would get credited from Apple. We would also receive the parts at free, no cost, and it was an exchange program. This is where they get you. So if you do like a motherboard replacement, you can't keep the old board. You have to send it back. Otherwise, they charge you a $300 core charge. But those boards could be used to repair other boards, like if it was like a connector failure or something like that. But unfortunately, that's how the warranty program works. Same with the LCD panel. So if there was a fix, I couldn't apply that fix without risking my core charge. The retail price of an LCD panel when they were still being sold was about $400, and then they discontinued them, obviously. When the machines hit the vintage phase after, I want to say 5 years, all parts are discontinued. Even if they have them in stock, they won't sell them to you. So, a little bit of how Apple works, and that's no secret, I'm sure. But so, after they were out of warranty after the 3-year period, where we actually had Apple Care on these things, I would actually buy the displays from Apple because there were no cost-effective used displays, and it was still kind of a new issue. So, I would buy the new displays from Apple. I would do the exchange for the core charge, and boom, $400. I get a new screen. As time went on, and the issue started to accelerate, I was left with one option alone, because eBay wasn't working out for me. I went to a company called Wegener Media, and they still sell these. And 2 years ago, it made sense to do this, but today, not so much. I'm going to pull up their site, and I'm going to show you what their solution is. Wegener Media is one of those companies, they're very opportunistic. When they see a problem or a service issue with the Mac, they try to find a solution so they can profit off of it, and that's genius. Well, they have a solution for the 17-inch iMac LCD failure. They do not have a 20-inch because the 20-inch wasn't that known for it. The 17-inch, boy oh boy, GTF, guaranteed to fail. They actually sell a modified, off-the-shelf 17-inch glossy display. This is actually it was either made for or from a laptop. It could be a Dell, Acer, what have you, HP. Anyway, they use all different makes and models as long as it fits the the size and the aspect ratio. They will install it in a custom frame. So the custom frame that they sell is made in-house. They must have laser cutters and brake machines. But they actually make custom side rails that mount to the edge of these displays, and then they screw directly into the iMac chassis. To make that work, they also include a lengthened LVDS cable. They use a cable from a 20-inch model. It all has to do with the placement of the input connector on the donor panel. So because the connector's further away, they have to use a lengthened cable with an adapter. And they also include a modified original Apple inverter. So the original LCD display from the 17-inch model uses two fluorescent tubes, one on the top, one on the bottom. And they're powered by an inverter that is mounted to the side of the display. And what this company does is they use genuine, from parts machines, inverter boards, and they will modify it to power only one bulb. Now, they do offer a warranty on these, and they will offer you a volume discount. They charge $169.50 retail for these. I've been getting them down to I really shouldn't even tell you. That's kind of proprietary information, but I buy them in bulk, so I get a major discount on them. And again, up to about a year or two ago, it kind of made sense to do that, but then we started phasing out the model, so we're like, all right, we're not doing this anymore. We're just going to retire the machines as they die. Replacement displays on eBay, again, they're hard to come by in working condition, and the G5 display is not compatible with the Intel, so I see a lot of 17-inch G5 displays, but no Intels. So, and the G5, I believe, did have a similar problem. I know the G5 had a capacitor issue, too. But anyway, they say it's compatible with basically every 17-inch Intel iMac. So, there you go. The package that they sell you has been modified based on my feedback. Originally, they had the inverter mounted to the side, but I told them that when you put it on the side, it actually presses against the optical drive, and it causes it to stick, and it won't eject discs. So I told them if you mount the inverter to the back of the display, it fits just fine, just barely, but it works. Ever since then, I've been getting them with modified inverter placements. I also told them about the cable length. I said, you're shipping these with 17-inch cables. 17-inch iMac cables. They need the 20-inch cables. So they started including 20-inch cables. So it's great because they will take customer feedback to heart and they will make good on it. They also sell other things too. Let's see what else they have. That's really the only thing I've ever bought from these guys. I have bought batteries from them in the past, but I try to buy my batteries from, Apple directly because I know they're going to be brand new and I know they will work, and they will. And they're less likely to explode. I know that I've seen genuine Apple batteries explode, so it's kind of a wash. But anyway, so that is the solution to the 17-inch iMac lines disease, as I call it. Now, the other thing you want to consider, if you're planning on collecting these things, if you're trying to add one to your collection, you want to find one that hasn't been worked on. And you can usually tell but unfortunately, you won't be able to tell when you're, looking at it in the store or on eBay. But if you take the front cover off, you're going to see a Mylar shield that's adhered to the face of the machine, and it comes up and it kind of adheres to the side of the display on either side and the top. A couple of things about that Mylar shield. It is an EMF shield. It is required by the SEC to reduce RF interference. That's what it's there for. If you take it off, do so at your own risk. You know, I don't know if, I doubt the FCC is going to come to your place of business or your home and say, oh my God. I don't think that's going to happen, but you might have interference. If you have a pacemaker, you might die. All right, that's an extreme example, but that's kind of one of the biggest problems I've had servicing these machines was the I want to say brilliant engineering shortcuts that Apple took and the uniqueness they tried to implement in the machine's design. I have to admit, it is unique, it's different, it's cool, it's hip, it's Apple, but when it comes to servicing them, it kind of makes it harder to do. So, the EMF shield was the biggest pain in the ass I've ever had to deal with, and it's only on these polycarbonate machines, not on the aluminum ones. The aluminum ones kind of solve the problem by changing the case material. I mean, it's aluminum. So, rather than using aluminized mylar, they used aluminum. That makes sense. So, the aluminized mylar shield is actually part of the entire case. So, it kind of lines the back of the machine, and it curls to the front around the display like this, kind of envelopes everything. And on the face of the machine, they've got it right here. When you do any service work to the 17-inch iMac or the 20-inch iMac, you have to carefully remove that shield. And when they're new, it's a piece of cake. You take a black stick and you gently work it loose all the way around and peel it away. And when you're done working on it, you can stick it back either with aluminized tape, or if it doesn't have any cuts, you can even use Kapton tape. But the official Apple service manual says to use aluminized tape. And you can seal it back up again. But it's always evident. So if you're looking at buying one, if you can ask the customer to let you take, and this isn't going to happen, kind of like when you buy a used car, they're not going to let you pull the cylinder head to check to make sure that the deck is perfectly square or some stupid, ridiculous thing like that. But if you do have a chance to see one apart, and you see that there's any evidence of breaching on that aluminized mylar shield, then you're pretty much guaranteed that the machine had been taken apart at some point for some reason, either by Apple or by someone wielding a tool. So anyway, so that's one thing that you kind of should know about, which is why when I decided to cherry pick one of these, I picked one that had never been serviced. And since I'm the only one servicing them, I can just look at my records and say, gee, oh, that one's never been apart. But I also know, because it's a 20-inch, I can count on one hand the number of 20-inch iMacs that I've had to take apart for any reason at all. Now, the ones that I've taken apart, or the ones I've had to service, I had one bad power supply, I had one of them with a bad logic board, and one of them I accidentally cracked the screen. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm no exception. But here's how it happened. So the one that I cracked the screen on, I think it needed a hard drive. It was something stupid. Now, to get to the hard drive, you have to remove the entire bezel, the LCD display, the mylar shield, the whole works. Hard drive on the 20-inch model is somewhere around here, if I recall. Tells you how many of these I've had apart. Right about this section. On the 17-inch, for your own reference, is way up here in the middle. So, to take the bezel off, you have to loosen or remove 4 screws from the bottom, the memory slot door, which is right in the middle, and you have to stick a credit card, like this one here, into the back of the machine, where it will hopefully, cross your fingers, hope to die, hopefully, unlatch a hidden latch right up in here. And there's one over here as well. When they were new, they were hard to fix. But as they got older, take apart, because the latch sometimes wouldn't disconnect. To properly unlatch one, you have to make sure that there's no pressure on that latch. So you want to squeeze the bezel and the back like this. Put a little bit of pressure. Make sure the latch is unloaded, meaning there's no stress on it. Then you slip the card in, and you might even hear it click. It goes bing, if it slips off. But Yeah, if you press the card in, it's going to push the latch out of the way where it's supposed to clear a pin or a molded in detent in the back of the machine. And same with the other side. So it's best to have 2 cards. You can do it with 1. I usually just do it with 1. Then once you have the latch released, you apply gentle pressure to the screen with your finger, with 2 fingers roughly, and then you just gently pull it forward. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to move forward. 99% of the time that doesn't happen. 99% of the time you have to keep shoving the fucking card in there until it finally releases. I had one that actually did release. This is the one that I broke. It released. Now this only happened once. Out of the some 300 machines I've worked on of this design, this happened once. And it was with the 20-inch. In addition to that latch, there's also a like a semi-soft rubber gasket that goes all the way around the machine's chassis. Don't know why it's there. I think it's just there to piss me off. But it's there, and as the machine gets older, that gasket hardens. Maybe that's what it's there for, so you can't get it apart when it gets old. Once that gasket begins to harden, the machine becomes more and more difficult. It gets harder and harder to separate the 2 pieces. Coupling that with finicky latches that, thank God, Apple abandoned when they redesigned them with the aluminum bezels. It can get pretty dicey getting these things apart. I had one machine that I actually had to tear the latches off. I'd been fuddling with it for like 20 minutes trying to get the damn thing to release. And that was the other 20-inch. That one needed a power supply. So the 20 inches, the moral of the story is they're hard to get apart. Oh, the one I broke. So I almost got it, and I'm just gently tugging, and I have a black stick back here, and I'm like trying to work it loose. And I put just a tad too much pressure onto the LCD panel, and it cracked. I'm like, you son of a bitch. I was so pissed. Fortunately, the machine was probably in its last year of operation. So I'm like, all right, I went on eBay, I bought a used display for like 20 bucks, and I fixed it. And by the way, the display replacements on the 20-inch are incredibly cheap because there's not as much of a demand for them. Because they don't break. So they don't fail. So that had happened to me, and any good technician is going to tell you that mistakes happen. They just do, and that was one of mine. I can count on one hand the number of machines I've actually destroyed by accident, a slip of a screwdriver or something stupid, just not paying attention, and it was always my fault. Never pass it on to anybody else but mine and mine alone. Things happen, and when you work on a large volume of equipment. And you have to do it quickly and cheaply. Mistakes can happen. Case in point. So, I had another one of these. Which is why I'm never taking this one apart. If it dies, it goes straight into the recycling pile. I'm not even going to bother with it. I'm not even going to bother fixing it. But I had one of these that the latches wouldn't release. They would not release. I tried several different cards of different stiffness, different sizes, and I could not get the stupid things to go. It got to the point where I took, and I'm not proud of this, but I did what I had to do. And the machines were getting ready to be, this is like probably, all of this happened like last year. And I knew they were going away, so I'm like, alright, here's what I'm going to do. I took a flathead screwdriver, I stuck it in between the lip and the back, and I just pried it off. Same thing with the other side. It's like I did what I had to do. It would not release. The gasket wasn't letting it happen. The latches were probably put on wrong. Who knows? But I just tore them apart. So when I got the bezel off completely, both latches, which are glued, by the way, to the inside of the bezel, they had completely torn away. I did the repair. I think that one was that might have been the power supply one. Did the repair. Actually, that power supply was fixable. I replaced, I think I replaced 1 or 2 capacitors that were blown and a fuse, powered it up, and it was fine. Checked all the voltages on it. Everything was good. So I was able to save that power supply. But what I did to reassemble it is I put the bezel back on. knowing that there's no latches there, I made sure that this wouldn't cause any problems with internal components, but I threw in 3 self-tapping screws, boing, 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 and they were the short ones, so they only penetrated like that much through the inside of the machine, and they didn't hit anything, and there was no metal to be, you know. It was the most rinky-dink, I gotta be honest, it was the most rinky-dink repair, the most Mickey Mouse repair I'd ever done in my life, and on a professional machine. But it lasted. It lasted longer than it was needed for. Let's put it that way. It was, you know, it was actually retired early on because we were starting to decommission these things, get them out of the, get them out of the environment. But these are the kinds of things that you're going to find when you start working on these. If you're fortunate enough, you're going to have no problems with yours at all. But having worked on as many as I have, I can tell you that they're kind of like Pandora's box. It's not as straightforward as working on something like this or even like these. These are very predictable. Everything is made out of aluminum, precisely machined. Nothing shifts over time. The tolerances don't change over time, and they are all built the same way. These are made out of plastic. As you know, plastic can deform over time. When exposed to heat and sun, UV radiation, it can deform, it can warp, and the level of precision just isn't there. It also expands and contracts very, very readily as it heats and cools. So one other thing, the 17-inch iMacs, I did mention hard drive failures. They're, I don't want to say they're notorious for it, but I had a lot of them. A disproportionate number of 17-inch iMacs had hard drive failures. I had 0, maybe one failure on the 20-inch models. And that was one of the 3 that I had to fix. But the 17-inch models, they're unique. The hard drive is placed right top dead center. And interestingly enough, that's where all the heat's going to go. When the fans are running at low speed, that's where all the heat's going to go. So what you end up having is a hard drive that basically cooks itself to death. In any normal machine, the hard drive is placed in an area that's pretty well kept away from heat sources. Not those iMacs. It's right there in the middle. It gets heat not only from the display, but from the motherboard, from the power supply right next to it, from the optical drive over here. And even though there are 3 cooling fans, there's one in the very back, that is the hard drive fan, by the way. Even though it's got plenty of fans, there's just not enough airflow in the machines to keep the drives happy. So they run hotter than they would in any other system, which leads to an early death. Now, if you put an inexpensive drive, like, say, a Western Digital Green or Blue, the chance of a repeat failure is extremely high. I had probably a 25%, 30, maybe 50% repeat failure rate on the ones that I installed the Western Digital Blue drives in. When I switched over to the black drives, that number dropped. The blue drives cannot handle the heat either, probably even less so than the Hitachis could. So I had a lot of failures with the blues and the green. I never really bought greens. I had a few of them that I recycled and put back in other systems, but not that many. The third thing, or the fourth thing, optical disk drive failures. Oh my God. Like the LCD displays, that's another GTF device. Guaranteed to fail. Unless you find one that, even if it was never used, that's the funny thing. Even on the units that didn't have drives that were regularly used, they were randomly failing. It's interesting. I mean, I can't really say what it is, in fact, that's causing it to fail, other than possible deformities in the plastic components of the drive itself as they age. And that is irrelevant to usage. One thing I can tell you is on the slot load drives that were used on the G3 iMacs, one thing that would happen to those is there was a plastic sheet that was part of the eject load mechanism, and it was adhered to the top of the drive cover. If I'm not I don't know how accurate I am on this, but it was actually held in place with an adhesive. And whether the drive was used or not, over time that adhesive would break down and it would actually interfere with the loading mechanism. Not the same issue here, but we're talking the same type of failure. The materials are only designed to last a couple years, and then they start to deteriorate, basically disintegrate. So that's one thing you got to watch out for. I had a lot of calls. I had a very high number of calls from users that were trying to play DVDs in their machines, and the discs would get stuck. Either they wouldn't play or they would simply get stuck. And this would happen randomly. So it's just one of those things. It just happens. And there's not much you can do other than take the drive out, find out what happened to it, make sure it wasn't vandalism, take the disc out, give it back to them. If I couldn't repair the drive, I would replace it with a used one. I would never buy new ones because they were $100 a piece. When they were covered under warranty, obviously that was another issue. I would replace them under warranty, but generally the failures all occurred after. So I want to say probably only 10% of the machines that I got rid of had functioning optical drives because they were just constantly breaking down. One thing that I can tell you that these are not known for, cooling fans. Apple has and continues to use pretty decent quality cooling fans, with one exception. I think it was the first batch of edge-to-edge glass 21.5-inch iMacs that we received. The fans would, the bearings would fail in the optical drive fans, which are located here. So here's how the fans are, this is what they're called. So your CPU fan is over here, your optical drive fan is over here, and your hard drive fan is in the rear center. That's the one that actually uses, there's a little vent in the back. And that's what that fan's purpose is right here. There's the vent for it. So, in the handful of hard drive fan failures I've experienced, it involved disassembling the machine all the way down to the back plane. So, you've got to remove the the bezel, the display, the logic board, and all ancillary components, and then you can get to the fan. A hard drive has to come out. It all has to come out. Boom, just rip it all apart. Gut it like a fish. And that's how you get to it. Fortunately, they're very reliable. Apple does use good quality. I think they're Sunons is what they're using on these. And yeah, they're just a damn good fan. Good bearings, good quality fan. It's a blower. They don't use any bladed fans. They're all blowers. A blower is like a squirrel cage, like a rotating set of fins. And kind of looks like it looks a little bit like a salad spinner, if you will. But they're great fans. The only problem with those is when they fill up with dust, they fill up with dust. So they can start to lose airflow. And that may attribute to some of the early failures with LCDs and hard drives, possibly. Any other service issues I wanted to mention? Logic boards are pretty decent on these, but you got to really watch out for the connectors. Nowadays, you can get a used board with good connectors for next to nothing, like a scrap broken board. But back in the day, you couldn't. And even if you could, it would be very difficult to do a connector replacement on these. Now, the way the connectors are mounted on these boards, I wish I had one to show you, but I don't. All my stuff is at work, and I don't want to bring it home. I don't want to bring work home with me. It's just how I roll. But the connectors they're actually like that long. Okay, so the connector is, and it's just a bad design by concept. It's like not made for durability. So you've got your board here, and then you've got your connector. Let me see if I can draw it out actually. Very bizarre. And it's interesting because this was something that Steve Jobs had mentioned in a keynote when they released the G5 iMac. So here's your motherboard. Do it like this. Okay. And here's the back of the machine. Okay, but not to scale. The connector mounts perpendicular to the motherboard, like that. And it's long, too. All of them are mounted that way. And they have a like a support board that kind of wraps around the midway to help provide strain relief. But that's it. So generally, when you have a failure with one of those connectors, I'll make it bigger for you. So the connector's like this. So here's the board, and here's the connector. Just like that. And they're actually mounted at a slight angle. So this isn't really exact, but so you have a lot of stress here and here. As the connector is used, is utilized, is moved, it's jostled. It provides a lot of strain down in this region of the board. So a lot of your failures are going to wind up somewhere down in that section. It happens. I would generally file those under warranty because it happened under normal use. And they would cover them. Not all of them, but some of them would be covered. I mean, it's just a ridiculous design flaw, and Apple continues to build them this way. But it was more of a problem with the DisplayPort adapters because we had these dongles. We were using actual Apple dongles, which would... I'm gonna draw this again. This is ridiculous. I mean, when you realize just how kind of it's just planned failure is what it is. So I'm going to draw the motherboard again. And I'm going to draw the connector as it's really done. This is how it's really mounted. Then I'm going to draw the dongle. And then here's the wire that comes out of it. So basically, I know that looks slightly inappropriate, but, well, only if you're sick. So you've got your connector, which is already under enough strain, and then you've got your dongle, which is adding to the leverage, and then you've got the cable on the end of that, and that cable connects to a giant connecting block, or a DB15 block. It's just bad engineering. But it works until it breaks, and then you buy a new one. And the cycle repeats. Because they didn't change the design. Anyway. Enough ranting. What are the good points of these iMacs? Well, they're fairly decent performers. They will run just about any OS up to 10.7.5, 10.6.8 for the earlier models. And, you know, overall, if you find one that's well cared for, that was used in a home environment, they're not that unreliable. If you're going to pick one up, I suggest highly you go for the 20-inch, not the 17. Just skip the 17 and go straight for the 20. The 20 has a better screen, better cooling, better graphics, generally higher spec. This is a 2.16. This is actually a... I'll tell you which one this is. This is it's got 4 gigs of RAM, DDR2, 2.16 Core 2 Duo. It's a 5.1. It has a 500 gigabyte Hitachi drive that is original to the machine. These had a higher. I think these were sold for around $1,700 when they were new. Now they're worth next to nothing, but they're not a bad little machine. They really aren't. It's got a 16-lane Radeon X 1600. And it has, I think, 256 megabytes of VRAM. So, you know, it's a better machine overall, and it's going to have less problems than the 17s. Now, I wanted to actually show you one other thing. This is something that, if you're still with us, thank you. Apple did something interesting with their mice. And these 3 mice represent about, let's see, it's 2016, so about 15 years of Apple mouse design history. And if you look closely, you'll realize that they're the exact same shell. And the innards may be different, but they're the exact same shell. This is the mouse that they currently sell. This is the mouse that preceded it. And this is the mouse that preceded that. So when we started out in 2001, we had this actually came in black too, but we had the Apple Pro mouse. Oh wait, no, there's actually a fourth version of this, which I had just a second ago. Alright, now we have a complete collection. This is every iteration of this mouse except for the black version, from beginning to present day. This mouse still retails for $49.95 on Apple's website. And this is it. This is exactly it. You'll notice that it's molded in a solid color. It still retains the mechanical trackball for scrolling. Opaque base. Red LED. This is the current mouse. Now, there's one version of this mouse that is not present, and that's the wireless one. And I don't have one. They're hard to come by. Well, in my world, they're hard to come by. But there is a wireless version of this mouse that looks exactly like this, until you flip it upside down and you see a battery cover. Very good mouse. I have owned one. It was a Bluetooth mouse, and probably one of the best mice I've ever owned. Now, the one that preceded this one is this version here. Now, this one, it looks exactly the same. This one's actually plugged in. It looks exactly the same, with the only exception that these side squeeze buttons are molded in a light gray finish. And the bottom ring is also molded in light gray. Actually, it hasn't really changed, has it? That's still light gray. But in all other aspects, they're exactly the same. This one is still in production. This one is not. Now, prior to that, Apple was using a single button mouse without a scrolling device of any kind. Apple was the last company to make a mouse that didn't have scrolling. Not sure why. Stubbornness, I would say, on their part. But, yeah. This mouse has a translucent cover, opaque side. Now, these aren't buttons. Apple's smart. They took a design that existed, and they're like, how can we make this different without changing it? So they just added some squeeze sensors, pressure sensors, to the side of the mouse, and that's how they were able to get the third button, if you will. But this mouse here is this is like iMac generation, or iMac G5 generation. That's roughly when this one came out. The one that preceded it in the very first version of this mouse was this one. This was the original Pro mouse, and it had an adjustable optical ring here. I'm not sure. I never did find an actual purpose for this, but there is one, I'm sure. I think it changes the sensitivity of the laser. I know I read up on that a long time ago, and I don't remember what it was. But I believe it changes the sensitivity of the laser. I think that's all it does. But the Pro mouse had it, nothing else did. And this also came in black. And this one here came out when the iMac was redesigned in like 2001. When they started going with the translucent casings in fun fruit colors. And I believe this one here came with a... I think this one came with a Dalmatian iMac. I'm fairly certain that's what this one came out of. Dalmatian or Flower Power. We had one of those in our environment. No, it was a Snow White one. It was a Snow White iMac. It was like the very last G3 iMac. And this is the kind of mouse it came with. All the other mice came with black Pro mice, if I recall. So... Now, the black one was still translucent on top, but it had a black where the white is. It was black. But so this is it. You know, they have a direct lineage. These are one and the same as far as profile, as far as hand feel. The only difference is some changes to the internal structure. They've added touch sensors to the left and right of the mouse. They've also added the scroll ball here. So... and with today's technology, I'm not sure why Apple still makes this mouse with the mechanical scroll ball. That kind of baffles me. Don't understand that. But they do strange things. Now, there's one other thing that bothers me, and it's always bothered me about Apple products. Now, Apple is really big on design. They're big on color coordination and all that shit. But what really bothers me is that they never released a black mouse to complement the black keyboard and black trim of the MacBook Pro. Why haven't they done that? Or even pursuing it even, well, I guess the PC keyboard has white keys, so I guess that's fine, but they never released a black one for the MacBook series. Every MacBook user I know uses a mouse. They don't use the trackpad on a regular basis. They use a mouse. So why hasn't Apple capitalized on that? This, by the way, is for those of you who know Apple products, obviously this is the new, the current generation Magic Mouse. And it's got to be the worst mouse I've ever used. It's also the most expensive. Figure that out. This is more comfortable. But I use this one because, well, I have it, and it's wireless and whatever. But one of the things I don't like about it is it tends to chap my fingers. The aluminum edge here can stick out just enough, because it kind of, the top of the mouse kind of moves a little bit. It's always been that way. But it kind of chaps my thumbs. I think it's caused calluses on my thumb. I don't know why they do it that way, but total function over form. That's the Apple way. Well, we're going to close out this video. It's gone on far too long. So thanks for watching.